Hi everyone, I'm Paul, and this is tip 6 in my speech quality course. Understand focus words. So before we start today, let's review a couple of the things that we've talked about in this course. First, do you remember primary stress? Primary stress is the syllable in words that has a clearer and longer vowel sound and a slightly higher pitch. For example, in this word, the primary stress is on the second syllable. Dessert. Do you remember thought groups? We talked about them in tip 5, I think it was. Yes, tip 5. So thought groups are groups of connected words that are surrounded by short pauses. Thought groups help the listener to process your speech, but they need to be in logical groups of language. So just like a word has one syllable that's stressed more, a thought group also has one word that's stressed more. We call this the focus word. Every thought group has one focus word, and the primary stress of the focus word has more stress than the primary stress of all the other words in the thought group. In language research, we call this focus word primary stress the nuclear stress or the tonic stress. In this tip, we're going to mark this focus word primary stress with a red dot. So the focus word is the most important word in the thought group. It helps to build speech rhythm over longer speech, and it can also help to communicate meaning to the listener. So it's important to remember that each thought group always has one focus word that has more stress. Let's go back to our company outline talk from tip 6. Do you remember where our thought groups were? We divided it into 10 thought groups with these short pauses here in red. Now, I'm going to read the company outline talk again. I'm going to include the focus word in each thought group. Now, I want you to listen and tell me if the focus word in each thought group is at the beginning of the thought group or at the end of the thought group. Here we go. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to briefly introduce our company. For those of you who don't know us, we design and manufacture electronic devices, for example, smartphones, tablets, and smartwatches. We are proud to say that we now have offices in 10 countries and over 10,000 employees. So what did you notice about the position of my focus words? Were they nearer the end or the beginning of the thought groups? Here are my focus words. As you can see, most of them were more towards the end of each thought group. If you can see here, 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 here. Generally more towards the end than the beginning of each thought group. Let's take a closer look at where we put the thought groups at the end of, where we put the focus words at the end of thought groups. So which words are focus words? So the focus word is usually the last content word of the thought group. Now, what's a content word? A content word is a word that has meaning, for example, noun, verb, adjective, or maybe adverb. Let's look at an example. Mark spends his weekends at university. So as you can see here, university is the last content word of the thought group, so it becomes the focus word. Let's look at another example. She asked him to call her. Here, call is the last content word of the thought group, so call becomes the focus word. Her is what we call a function word. Function words are grammatical words, and they're not usually focus words in thought groups. So function words, for example, are pronouns, conjunctions, articles, these words that create grammar. Let's try one more example. Do you want to talk about it? So here, the focus word is on talk because it's the last content word. About it are both function words. Let's go back to my talk. So as you can see here, my talk also basically follows this rule. Afternoon is the last content word. Company, last content word. No, last content word. Devices. Smartphones and smartwatches are both compound nouns, so they're treated as one noun. And say, so that is what we would call a function word. The last content word is say. The only exception is the last sentence where I've changed the focus word from the final noun to the word before it to 10 and 10,000. So it's not the final content word here. We'll talk about this a little bit more in a little bit. Let's talk about focus words and communication. Sometimes we can change the focus words in a thought group to change the meaning. Let's talk about coffee. Have a look at this example. Sam drinks coffee every morning. So morning is the focus word. Okay, so that's what we would expect in a normal thought group. Let's change the focus word to Sam. Sam drinks coffee every morning. So in this case, we're changing the meaning. We're putting the focus on Sam, the fact that it's Sam drinking coffee and not another person like Mary or Peter. How about this one? Here we're changing the focus word to coffee. Sam drinks coffee every morning. Here we're putting the focus on coffee, so the meaning becomes the fact that Sam's drinking coffee and not some other drink like tea or milk. But we have to be careful we don't change the focus word too much. It can make it confusing for the listener. For example, Sam drinks coffee every morning. He really likes coffee, but his best friend doesn't. You can see here that the focus word is jumping around and it's quite confusing or strange to listen to. So when do we usually change the focus word? One time we usually change it is to show contrast, to show how two things are different between thought groups. For example, here, I can speak Chinese, but I can't read it. Here we're moving the content word to speak to compare it with reading Chinese, being able to speak Chinese, but not being able to read it. So the content word is changing to speak, comparing speak with read. Let's try another time we often change the focus word is to highlight new information. Here's an example. I love ice cream, especially strawberry ice cream. Here, in the second sentence, we're moving the focus word to strawberry to give more information or new information about the kind of ice cream we like. We can also use it to correct mistakes. For example, I'm a teacher at this school, not a student. So here we're correcting a mistake that's been made between the teacher and student words. We can also use it for general emphasis. For example, it was a huge mistake to say that. So here we're putting the emphasis onto the word huge to emphasize how the size of the mistake here. And that's what I've done in the final sentences, the final thought groups of my talk. I've emphasized the numbers here to sort of emphasize the large size of this company. Okay, so what are the key points from our focus word tip today? Focused words are used with thought groups to create the natural rhythm of English that the listener will be expecting, especially in longer speech. But we can change the focus words to communicate meaning, not just in longer speech, but also in general conversation. Try some practice at home. So I want you to listen again to my company outline talk. And then I want you to repeat as you listen and focus on the focus words stress and the intonation. As you're listening, try and copy my language and sounds as closely as possible. Don't worry about trying to understand the meaning while you're listening. Just focus on copying my sounds as you hear them. So you're sort of following my speech about 2 to 3 seconds after it. We call this type of practice shadowing, and it really helps us to build our speech quality. In next week's tip, we're going to talk about some common linking patterns and how they can help us understand conversation and more casual speech. For more tips on language learning and teaching, visit my website at paulmaka.com. On my website, you can also find information on online courses that I'll be starting on Sundays on Zoom from this April. See you next week.